Hello and welcome to the Entrepreneurial Musician podcast. My name is Andrew Hitz and I am your host, and I have decided to make this a weekly podcast rather than bi-weekly. I will continue to be hosting an interview every other week, but in the following weeks from each interview, I am going to do a brief discussion just by myself on one of the topics that I found interesting from the previous guest. And the previous guest was Jeff Connor of Boston Brass, who was my colleague in the quintet for 14 years. And he had a lot of really great things to say. It was wonderful to get him on the program. But the thing that I really liked that he talked about was about networking. And there was a nice anecdote about him getting to meet Jack Connors, who was a famous Boston businessman, and about how he ended up supporting the group financially a number of years back, including promotional materials and loaning talent from the advertising agency Hill Holiday that he ran to help us to spearhead a campaign. And what my thoughts were about this is that a lot of musicians, I would even say that most successful musicians are good at networking, but there are not many musicians who are great at networking. And I think that is an easy point of differentiation for all of us in the business, that if we can get more organized, more intentional with our networking, that it will pay big dividends. The thing that I really loved about Jeff's story about Jack Connors was not just the fact that he had the courage to walk up to Mr. Connors when he saw him at this function that he knew he was going to be at, but as our producer Buddy asked him on the episode, it was wonderful that he asked him if he knew ahead of time that he was on the Board of Trustees from Boston College, and sure enough, Jeff had a student who had a connection to the Board of Trustees, and Jeff had taken the time to research exactly who the Board of Trustees were before this function. And so he already knew who the important people in the room were going to be. And then when he saw Mr. Connors, he then saw his opening. But if he had not done the legwork beforehand, then it wouldn't have mattered how much courage he had to go and approach him. He would not have known that that was someone that it would be good to introduce himself to. And so that's what I mean by intentional networking, is that Jeff, before he was confronted with the opportunity to meet him, he knew that he wanted to meet him. And I would suggest, there are a lot of ways to do this, but I would suggest using something like Evernote, which all of my students who are listening to this right now are rolling their eyes because I talk about Evernote all the time. Evernote is an app. You can use it on the web as well. It's on Android. It's on the iPhone. It's everywhere. But I put absolutely every single note about anything into Evernote, and therefore I always know where to look because anything that I need is always there. Personal things, business things, silly things, everything. And so if you utilize Evernote to keep track of contacts, potential contacts, exactly where you met them, there are a lot of people who you may meet. And when I was on the road with Boston Brass, I used to meet people in bunches a lot of times. At conferences, I would meet so many people that it was hard to keep track of it all. But if you take some just very brief notes, and you can also, by the way, use things like Google image searches or Facebook or that kind of thing. If you know that you know someone's name and you should be able to put a face to their name, you can look up their face. I've done that many times before you encounter them, if you kind of think ahead of time so that you then can address them by name. And that goes a really, really long ways. The other thing that I wanted to talk about that Jeff had mentioned, a great quote from the episode was when he said that networking is not about instant gratification, but it's about building a career-long relationship. And again, that's something that even if the person that you are networking with does not have anything that can immediately help you, and likewise that there is nothing that you have that can immediately help them, it is great to build a relationship there and to make sure that you point out to them that if there's ever anything that you can do to help them along, that please not to hesitate. Therefore, when you reach back out to that person, whether it's a small favor or a big favor, there is already a little bit of a rapport there. Jeff is also really good, and I know this from seeing him do it, at follow-ups. after we would play a gig. He's really good at dropping a note to someone to thank them for having us. He was very good at kind of closing the loop. Once whatever was supposed to happen happened, he was very good at thanking that person for whatever role that they played in it, which very much makes that person want to work with you again, and also may have that person. You're never going to get closer to a person in the business than you are by you doing them a favor. And so if they get to a comfort level where they can ask you for something and then you then do it, not to repay, sometimes you have to make the first move, but that will endear you to them, and your reputation precedes you in this business, always, the good and the bad, and they both will precede you. And so it's great to that Jeff is so good at the follow up. And the last thing that I wanted to mention was that there is a book that I would recommend on this subject, which is by an author by the name of Keith Ferrazzi, and I will put this in the show notes. But the book is called Never Eat Alone, and this is a book all about networking. And I'm not sure if he uses the term intentional networking, but that is exactly what he preaches, which is to know who you're trying to reach, and then to keep track of who you've reached, and it's a really great book. So I would strongly encourage anyone that is curious about it, but to reiterate that there are not many musicians who are really great at networking, and so therefore that is an easy point of differentiation and an easy way for any of us to kind of get a leg up, if you will, on the competition, whether we are representing just ourselves or an ensemble. So those are my thoughts that were inspired by Jeff Connor's interview about networking, and I will see you all next week. Thank you so much. You've been listening to The Entrepreneurial Musician with Andrew Hitz on the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network. If you would like to help support the podcast in order to make more episodes like this one possible, please visit pedalnotemedia.com/donate for more details. You can sign up for my monthly newsletter and find my blog at andrewhitz.com. You can also find me at facebook.com/hitztuba, and I'm at hitztuba on Twitter. The Entrepreneurial Musician is produced by Austin Boyer and Buddy Deschler of the Fredericksburg Brass Institute. Executive producer is Andrew Hitz. The theme music was performed by Ben Barron, Rich Kelly, Daniel Lapel, and Andrew Hitz. This has been a presentation of the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network.